The Proud Boys are officially a terrorist entity in Canada. The story from the Toronto Star: Canadian government to list Proud Boys as terroristic group. And my friends, of course, it is coming here to the U.S. There's a lot of interesting ramifications for the designation of the Proud Boys as a terrorist entity. Will the U.S. now consider them to be a foreign terrorist entity, or are they going to be a protected group in this country? Donald Trump tried going after Antifa, and it was because Antifa exists in other countries. There was a lot of speculation that Trump could designate Antifa a terrorist group because of their foreign affiliation, essentially looking at countries like Turkey or whatever and saying that Antifa group is a terrorist entity. Therefore, anyone in America supporting them is supporting terrorists. Theoretically, the same thing could happen now with the Proud Boys. And we are hearing from good old NPR, former CIA officer says, treat domestic extremism as an insurgency. It's coming. These people on the left, AOC does this viral live stream where she talked about the mob coming for her and she was hiding in her office or in someone else's office. Another rep has come out and said, the rioters never came anywhere near our offices. What is she talking about? AOC claimed that she was scared and hiding in her office and then eventually hiding in her bathroom. But in her story, she mentions that her staffers were in the office lobby, I guess. And when the cop came to bang on the door to figure out where she was to save her, her staffer was there, like unprotected, guarding her. You see, look, they're treating this like some kind of 9/11 style event. Now, I'm not trying to equate the severity of the Capitol with what happened on 9/11. I'm equating the reaction and the news cycle. But this country, we're seeing a hard political divide. You've got a ridiculous split between left and right. The good news for the Democrats, however, is that Republicans are pathetic, spineless losers who are already crying and on their knees and saying, we'll give you whatever you want. The Republican Party is just so pathetic and spineless. I mean, look, shout out to, I guess, Rand Paul and, like maybe Ted Cruz and Hawley and Thomas Massey. I mean, there's a handful, Matt Gaetz. There are Republicans who are, who do have a spine. But man, is Mitch McConnell like the weakest spineless turtle man ever. And that guy wins? Yikes. All right, let's read the news and talk about the Proud Boys and then see what's going to happen here in the U.S. They say at the Toronto Star, the Canadian government will list the far-right Proud Boys movement as a terrorist group, the Star has learned. The loosely organized Western chauvinist group is expected to be formally added to Canada's terrorist entity list later today. The Proud Boys came under increased scrutiny after the January 6th storming of the U.S. Capitol building. News reports identified several Proud Boys members among the mob of Donald Trump supporters. But sources told the Star last week that Canada's intelligence agencies have been probing white supremacist and neo-Nazi groups for several months. Public Safety Minister Bill Blair's office said last month that intelligence and law enforcement entities were very actively monitoring far-right and white supremacist groups. We strongly denounce ideologically motivated extremists, including groups like the Proud Boys, white supremacists, anti-Semites, Islamophobic and misogynist groups, Blair's office said in a January statement. Intolerance and hate have no place in our society. But the Proud Boys listing will come as a surprise to anti-hate and anti-fascist groups in Canada. While created by Gavin McInnes, a Canadian far-right media personality, the group's Canadian chapters were believed to be disorganized and not particularly effective. The government's move to acknowledge it as a terrorist group alongside the Islamic State and Al-Qaeda suggests the group is perceived as more threatening than previously believed. The terrorist designation comes with significant consequences for the group's members and supporters. It will allow financial institutions to freeze assets, empower police to seize property, and make it illegal to knowingly participate or contribute to the organization. My friends, a wave is coming. It is coming here to the U.S. Now, we have a constitution, but let's be honest. They have both parties, whatever parties, have just taken huge dumps all over the Constitution for generations. I was talking on the IRL podcast about the right to keep and bear arms. And I'm like, how is it that they literally say in the Constitution, you have the right to bear arms, it shall not be infringed. And then all of these states literally ban carrying a weapon. It says you can bear the arms, and then they pass laws saying you can't. Yeah, the Constitution is meaningless because they keep eroding or chipping away at it. And that's it. So why should I sit here expecting the Constitution to be my shield, at least forever? The Constitution does afford us wonderful protections, the Bill of Rights specifically, and I respect this. It's brilliant. I'm glad it exists. But listen, Like with any shield, eventually it erodes. And if the shield is not being repaired and protected, eventually it falls apart. And that's where we're going now. In the U.S., it's particularly difficult, if not impossible, to label a group a domestic terror organization because we have a right to freedom of speech. So long as you're not advocating for people to commit crimes, telling them how to do it, where to do it, when to do it, or to do it, you're typically fine. So the Proud Boys are allowed to exist. The issue now is with the foreign designation. I believe it's entirely likely we will see Democrats, Joe Biden, the House, the Senate, move to place very serious restrictions on the Proud Boys. But more importantly, censorship and restrictions will come from the private sector. Due to this designation, it is extremely likely that anyone who has ever associated with the Proud Boys will probably get banned from Facebook, from Twitter, from YouTube, etc. And they will keep doing this. Think about how stupid and absurd it is to list the Proud Boys alongside ISIS. Are you kidding me, dude? ISIS literally took over a large portion of the planet. They were kidnapping and raping women. They were beheading people and filming it. The Proud Boys go around and get drunk and then complain about SJWs and get into fights with Antifa. Sure, not an ideal circumstance for anybody. And there's a lot of problems and a lot of things you can criticize the Proud Boys for, but come on. If anything, you could call them, I guess, rabble-rousers. That's about it. But terrorists? Don't be surprised when you now hear this rhetoric expanding. Because the Republicans are pathetic, spineless losers, they're not going to defend anyone on the right. You know what, man? I saw this really hilarious post. It was a meme where somebody was like, there was a post about Medicare for all, and someone said, but Republicans won't fight for gun rights. And then there was a response where they were like, what does, so you don't want health care? You don't think the government should pay for health care? And they said, no. I think the government should pay for health care. And they should pay for my gun, too. If having a gun is a right and health care is a right and you think the health care should be paid for, then my gun should be paid for. I like the logic. It makes sense. But regardless of whether or not you actually want to entertain the idea that the government should be buying everyone guns, maybe there should be a Department of Gun Services where when you turn 16 or whatever, you go and get your first gun or something. Where are the Republicans to actually advocate for anything the right wants? They don't. Because Republicans tend to be sitting down in their rocking chairs, sipping their sweet tea, saying, well, slow down there, Democrats. And that's it. That's for the most part it. Now you end up seeing, you get people like Matt Gaetz, who is a young upstart, youngish, and he's fighting for what he believes in and actually advocating for certain things. Still, you're not seeing him present the mirror image to what Democrats are doing. The left says the taxpayer should cover the cost of healthcare for everyone. Okay, the taxpayer should cover the cost of guns for everyone, because that's actually in the Constitution as a right. But that never happens. And again, I'm not actually advocating for that. I'm saying the point is it never happens. You do not have the right countering. So what's going to happen is you're going to get good old Mitch McConnell sitting in his little turtle rocking chair, sipping his sweet tea, saying, well, they want to list the Proud Boys as terrorists. Why don't you slow down there, Democrats? We'll do it next year. That's about it. Is he going to say, no, this is a problem? Are the Republicans going to reject this? Dude, I really don't buy it. Here's a story from NPR. They say when it comes to domestic extremists, such as those who stormed the Capitol, a longtime CIA officer argues that the U.S. should treat them as an insurgency. This means using counterinsurgency tactics similar in some ways to those used in the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. I hope you're talking about Antifa, right? Who went around burning down cities? You know what, man? There's no point in even saying it right now because we all know we're watching it happen. Unfortunately, there are a bunch of mindless morons who sit there drooling in front of the TV, not paying attention to what's actually going on. And then when Joe Biden basically backtracks on everything he promised, now they're like, what's happening? I thought voting for Biden would mean shut up. Voting for Biden. These faux progressives on YouTube saying, we have to stop Trump. Then they were shocked to see it was Trump advocating for 2K, not Joe Biden. He's advocating for 14. Congratulations. You voted for it. Maybe you were too stupid to realize you were voting for Goldman Sachs and the war machine. Not like Trump was perfect or all that much better, but he was still better. They say, Robert Grenier served as the CIA station chief for Pakistan and Afghanistan in 2001. He went on to become the CIA's Iraq mission manager and then director of the CIA Counterterrorism Center from 2004 to 2006. Quote, we may be witnessing the dawn of a sustained wave of violent insurgency within our own country, perpetrated by our own countrymen, Grenier wrote in the New York Times last week. And without national action, he argues, extremists who seek a social apocalypse are capable of producing endemic political violence of a sort not seen in this country since Reconstruction. You see, A lot of these people, these thought leader types, former CIA, they're not smart. Okay, they may be storied and they may have worked a long career, but being smart is something different. They don't know how to do any independent research. So when Antifa allies go in media and then start saying dumb things and defending the extremist organizations, and I'm talking about the multiple cells of Antifa, you then end up with these morons not understanding how much of a problem the far left is. Now, I can already hear the screeches of the leftists saying, like, the far right is the biggest threat. They tried to stage an insurgency. The Gravel Institute tweeted they supported the effort, the tactic, but not the group. They said they believed it would be good if Antifa stormed the Capitol. So shut your mouths. They're lying, and if you can't see they're lying, well, then I'm sorry. You deserve to live under their boot, I guess. You get what you vote for. You get what you deserve. And I don't mean that in a retribution kind of way. I mean it in, if you keep voting for politicians that support extremists smashing your windows and burning down your city, then why am I going to come to the defense of you when you asked for it? I'm not going to do it. Now, what we're seeing is the security state, the apparatus, they are going to do everything in their power to crush anyone who dares oppose them. And it won't just be the right. They'll definitely come for the left. It's like that old poem. I know it's a bit cliche to bring up, but first they came from the socialists, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a socialist. That is not about socialism. It's about those you don't agree with or those who are not in your periphery and you're not in your worldview. What they're saying, and I did not speak up for them, is that when Antifa gets banned or censored for BS reasons, I do speak up for them because I understand what comes next because I paid attention to history lessons. They don't. They cheer for it. And then you end up seeing the progressives themselves get banned, and we go, oh no, who could have seen this coming? But I'll still defend them and their right to free speech and challenge the censorship. Here we go. In an interview with All Things Considered, Grenier discusses what the national action would mean. Question. As someone who has watched many violent insurgencies unfold in various countries around the world, what felt the same to you? What felt different? He said, I don't want to be the one to suggest that somehow the U.S. is going to in any way resemble Iraq or Afghanistan at the height of violence. But what I think is useful is to have some way of thinking about the problem and thinking through the elements of the solution. So I think, as in any insurgency situation, you have committed insurgents who are typically a relatively small portion of the affected population. But what enables them to carry forward their program is a large number of people from whom they can draw tacit support. And that's what I'm primarily concerned with here. I think what is most important is that we drive a wedge between those violent individuals and the people who may otherwise see them as reflecting their interests and fighting on their behalf. Like journalists, like all the media outlets that defended Antifa. Or how about Kamala Harris, who literally fundraised for rioters? Let me remind you, 19 people died in the George Floyd riots. But Joe Biden's staff supported it, and Kamala Harris herself tweeted out fundraising support for overt, literal terrorists. Is she going to be expelled or removed? No. They put her in the vice presidency. The question, what do you do about it? Grenier says, I think the most important element of the struggle, if you will, is information. We're not talking about an alien population here. There are friends of mine who believe the election was stolen. There are members of my family who have very strong doubts. And I think there are a great many people whom don't trust you. Mary Louise, I hate to be the one to break it to you, who don't trust NPR or the New York Times. I wonder why. What would make anybody not trust the New York Times? Could it be the Iraq War and 20 years of foreign excursion? Are you seriously that daft? The New York Times lied. They put, okay, maybe it's a little harsh. Let's put it this way. Their sheer incompetence and their inability to do their jobs helped lead us into a 20-year-long ridiculous war. For what? And I'm supposed to trust the New York Times? Now, I'll be honest with you. I typically do. Not always. I fact check them. But I don't think the New York Times is all bad. I think you just have to watch out because they're willing to pull the wool over your eyes. They're willing to trick you. So heaven forbid someone doesn't trust them. When they run a story, NPR, saying we need these domestic insurgency tactics. Yeah, like I'm going to believe you authoritarian wingnuts. He says, but again, I think this is the work of a nation. I mean, it's trite to say that we need a national conversation, but in fact, that's what we need. And so it's people. It's all of us who really need to be engaging with one another in a very sincere way. Admitting what we don't know and trying to seek out the truth together. Because without that, I think there's a level of distrust that is not only unfortunate for the politics in this country, but will also provide a basis for sporadic but endemic violence in this country. Let me tell you what the problem is, my friends. It's very simple. When I tell you They're far-right extremists, and they've committed atrocities, very horrifying acts. What we tend to see from the far right, whatever that means, to be completely honest, because it's not clearly defined by many of these news organizations, is extremely acute actions. Someone with a gun going into a place and then, killing lots of people. What we see from the left is flattened out and blunt. Substantially more instances, but low-level violence. Now, we as a society can tolerate Antifa maybe punching someone in the head or throwing fireworks at them. It happens all the time, though, because we tolerate it. We shouldn't do it. When one person go out and commits a mass atrocity, like, Vegas or something, it is what we cannot bear in any capacity. Now, they're much more rare, but we must make sure we stop them. So when law enforcement says they're going after the extremists, I say, by all means. When you have Antifa for over a year, for years, engaging in escalating violence, terrorizing, beating people, smashing windows, starting fires, the terrorism is sustained and we must stop it. But see, these people in media don't know or care because they don't know how to do their jobs anymore. They really don't. The news industry is collapsing and they're not being honest with you to tell you about what the problem really is. And the problem is, it's fair to say extremists on all sides. It is. The right would say, yes, but Antifa does it way, way, way more. It's just not as serious. That's a fair point. The left would say, but who cares about someone getting hit in the head? I care about the extremists with the machine gun. Okay. Well, we haven't seen a machine gun, but, using like a bump stock or something. You're right. Those are bad. It's all bad. It's all bad. The problem is they're ignoring one of it. Everyone condemned. Okay, almost everyone condemned what happened at the Capitol. But where is the left's condemnation of the 19 deaths in the George Floyd riots? I'm still waiting. No, instead, they smear Michael Tracy, a journalist, for criticizing AOC. Meanwhile, he's one of the only journalists who actually traveled around this country showing us the devastation from the far left George Floyd riots. But they defend it. That's the name of the game. They say, is there anything that you think could be done with a sense of urgency? Part of it is simply setting the proper national tone. But another, I think, very important element that we haven't talked about yet is what I would refer to as insurgent leadership. The fact of the matter is that the most violent elements that we are concerned about right now see the former President Trump as a broadly popular and charismatic symbol. 75 million people. Is that who you're referring to? He is their charismatic leader, whether he chooses to acknowledge it or not. Just as I saw in the Middle East, that the air went out of the violent demonstrations when Saddam Hussein was defeated and seen to be defeated. I think the same situation applies here. The fact of the matter is that Mr. Trump has lost. It's very important that people see that he has lost as a private citizen. But I think it's extremely important that his potency as a symbol for the most violent among us is somehow addressed. The most violent among us. What does that mean? Are the Trump supporters violent? No. Have there been instances of violence with Trump supporters? Absolutely. But as a whole, on a general statement, they're not violent. The far left, on the whole, they are much, I think it's more fair to say, but I would withstand the argument. There are a lot of far leftists, overt socialists that aren't extremely violent. But Antifa is massive. They're a decentralized network of various organizations that fly the Antifa flag. And they're in every major city. They're powerful in certain regions. They have thousands or tens of thousands of adherents. So you want to talk about who's more violent. 75 million Trump supporters, of which a few hundred actually stormed the Capitol. And that was bad, don't get me wrong. Or the tens of thousands of Antifa who for years have been going around destroying things, and those who would defend them and those who would ride alongside them, killing 19 people or resulting in the deaths of 19 people. Listen, you want to stop far-right extremism? You have my blessing and my support. If you say you want the FBI to go after these far-right extremists, I say, bring it on, baby. Let's make sure these people don't hurt anybody. And then when I say, now, we should also make sure we're focused on the lower level terrorism that's more widespread, like Antifa. And then you plug your ears and start screaming at me. You see, now we got a problem. Republicans don't know how to deal with it because they are spineless and pathetic, and all they do is play the game of the left. The left pouts and screams and says violence and terror, and Mitch McConnell goes, okay, Democrats, we'll get right on it. Meanwhile, Antifa runs amok and nothing happens. Nothing. So I'll tell you what I'd like to see. I'd like to see balance in politics. I'd like to see actual justice for those who would commit crimes to be punished. Instead, in Portland, all of these rioters were cut loose. Their charges were dropped. And now they're screaming white privilege because some woman who was being charged with misdemeanor trespass at the Capitol was given permission to go to Mexico for vacation. She's not being charged with a felony. She's being charged with walking onto the Capitol property. She's going to get a slap on the wrist. They're going to say, stay out of D.C. And she's going to say, okay, that's it. She's going on vacation. They're screaming white privilege. Meanwhile, you literally had people murdered in Portland's autonomous zone. Has anybody been brought to justice for the deaths in the autonomous zone? Has that guy Raz, who was was on video giving out a gun to, I believe it was a minor, giving out a gun to somebody and then going and patrolling? Has he been charged with anything? So spare me. But my friends, I tell you this, it's obvious what's coming. Hey, look, I got a lot of criticism for the Proud Boys, for sure. But terrorists, that's insane. Don't be surprised when this rhetoric, combined with what Canada's doing, results in banks shutting down all of their accounts, banning all of them. And don't be surprised if the interviews even I've done with Enrique Tarrio, or the interview we had him on the IRL podcast, gets taken down. Because he mentions his store or whatever. Don't be surprised. It is expanding. It will get worse. There's barbed wire barricades around the White House. They're saying will be permanent. The D.C. is under military occupation. It's here. It's happening. Did you think the dystopia would come with no excuse? Did you think one day you'd wake up and there would just be a totalitarian government like you're reading 1984 and just happens? There would always be an excuse. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast, a different channel from this one. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.